quotes, infused with the scent of potpourri, films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly podcast that reviews one or two new release titles every episode with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end of the show that we call Potpourri. You can find more of our work, including written reviews, full episode show notes, and the complete backlog of our episodes at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also write into the show by emailing me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can get access to content at any of our tier levels on a recurring monthly subscription basis, or you can buy individual collections of episodes a la carte in the Patreon shop section. This week on the Patreon, I am continuing my Flanagan Fridays and Sci-Fi Saturday series, still on the Haunting of Hill House and still on season 2 of Foundation, which is slightly getting a little bit better, so that's definitely good. I also have some Patreon potpourri stuff out there, which is just collections of 4 movie reviews, usually from stuff that I watch on Criterion Channel. So check that out, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, including Letterboxd at obsessiveviewer. And in our featured review this week, we'll be reviewing Matthew Vaughn's latest movie, Argylle, which opened in theaters this past week by the time you're listening to this, on February 2nd. And for this week's secondary review, we're going to be covering David Ayer's latest movie, The Beekeeper, which is currently wrapping up its theatrical run and is now available on PVOD as of January 30th. And joining me tonight to do that is my friend and IFJ colleague, Mr. Nick Rogers, who can be followed on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/ragecage with a K 79. And you can also read his work, including his monthly Class of series, in which he reviews titles celebrating a milestone anniversary, on MidwestFilmJournal.com. Welcome back to the show, Nick. It's been a while since you've been on. How's it going, man?
It has been a while. Thanks for having me. We were actually just talking at the Argylle screening the other night that it was like a year exactly, I think, the last time that I was on the show, and we were talking Knock at the Cabin, which was like a year to the day almost as the screening for Argylle. And
in
same
that
studio,
same theater.
Universal, same theater. It was like 2024, 2023, time has no meaning. It's a flat circle.
Exactly.
True Detective is back. So, there we go, right?
Yeah. Have you been...
But no, glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, of course. Have you watched any of the new True Detective? I can't remember if you've watched any.
I watched the first episode, but I have not yet watched the second and third, and I think it's only 6 episodes this installment, if I remember reading that correctly. So it's halfway over. I like the pilot. I have enjoyed all of the seasons so far, the 3 that they've completed. I mean, the first one I think remains, by far the best. But I think if the Colin Farrell, Vince Vaughn, Rachel McAdams, Taylor Kitsch season had followed anything else, it probably would not have gotten as many negative marks. But so it went.
Yeah. That was such a just... like those were just monumental shoes to fill, and I know that there was a quick turnaround time too. Like I know Nick Pizzolatto. I get, from what I remember, like he had worked tirelessly on crafting the first season for like a long time, and then a year turnaround time for season 2. And
it's a classic. It's the classic dilemma. You work for years and years and years, and you have a hit, and they're like, "What do you have for us tomorrow?"
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Right. So
you're speaking to a guy with 3 podcasts, so I know exactly what you mean.
That's right. That's right. Beast feeding.
Yes.
Beast feeding all the way.
Yes. And speaking of feeding the beast, I did want to mention, first of all, that you have been hitting the ground running with a ton of stuff in terms of film reviews. Like I took a look, and you have written reviews for already. We're recording this February 1st. And you have written reviews for Lift, Self-Reliance, The Book of Clarence, One More Shot, The Beekeeper, Fighter, and then, of course, the Class of series, in which you are spinning it off into a new series as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, a little bit. So, I would say, I guess to your first point, this has been maybe an atypically prolific January as far as I'm concerned. But I've sort of been like, okay, if I can knock out something short but meaningful about this movie, it's worth doing. And so some of those have been just kind of larks, I guess, of things that I just sort of watched and had a perspective. Nice. One More Shot kind of being the resident grumpus, I guess, about this is not as good a direct to video action movie as people are saying it is, but. To your point about Class of, so Class of is a series that I've been doing for a long while now that has some sort of self-imposed rules, but is generally a look at movies celebrating a 20th, 30th, or 40th anniversary. I try to do stuff that didn't finish in the top 10 at the box office in a year or get any Oscar nominations. So I include song in that. I include sound in that. That has really screwed me over a couple of times. I really wanted to write about something. It was like, it had like a song nomination. So I was like, no. I am sort of spinning it off into something, they'll intersect a little bit, but they won't necessarily always intersect, which is a series that actually anybody from Midwest Film Journal can contribute to, called Coming Around Again. Kind of the idea is like, these are movies that I didn't like, or that anybody that's writing that didn't like the first time, but they're very much in the minority on that, and kind of, with some distance and some time, kind of coming back to it to see if they feel differently. I kicked that off with probably not the most auspicious of things to reassess in December of last year with Paycheck, which was the last John Woo Hollywood film prior to Silent Night last year. So Paycheck still kind of sucks. It just doesn't suck, I guess, as bad as I remembered.
Sure.
And I'm doing it again, not keeping the streak very positive here. But I'm doing it this month with On Deadly Ground, which was Steven Seagal's ill-fated foray into directing himself.
Oh God.
So yeah, it's bad. I'm gonna guess I probably will enjoy it more now with the hindsight of knowing that it's like Steven Seagal's ecological treatise with the occasional beatdown from the perspective of how stupid that is. So yeah, lots of writing, lots of fun stuff, that I've been doing and that colleagues at Midwest Film Journal have been doing. We've got another fun year planned with some special series, and we're looking forward to it.
Nice. And I'm looking forward to participating in some of those series and reading what all you guys put out there, because it's one of my go-to websites to check out. Of course. Yeah, of course. And so that's all at MidwestFilmJournal.com. Definitely check that out. And I'll put links to all the stuff in the show notes as well. Before we get to our featured review for the night, there's been a bunch of like news that's come out and everything, but I didn't do my due diligence of preparing too much. So there were a couple of things I wanted to kind of just get like your read on here. One namely is, by the time people are listening to this is coming out next week. So, this is going to be very, very old news, obviously, but, any thoughts on the Oscar nominations? Anything stick out?
I would say, there's usually one movie that gets nominated for Best Picture that I'm like, I just don't get it at all. It didn't click for me. There really aren't any like that this year. There's certainly, a big drop off, I think, for me from my top ones. But nothing that was nominated in that category fell below like a 3 out of 5 for me. Usually there's like a 2.5 that kind of gets in there. So overall, I think that crop is pretty strong. I look at it and I guess, like my armchair prediction instincts, sort of say, I think it looks good for Oppenheimer to win. picture, director, a lot of tech awards, and be the leader for the night, while also giving them the opportunity to give a couple of Oscars to The Holdovers, a couple of Oscars to Barbie, a couple Oscars to, something else that they'll kind of spread the love around, maybe Poor Things. I would say, there's, the Gerwig and Robbie snubs being what they are, they still got nominated for other Oscars, just not the categories everybody thought they were going to be nominated in. So, I think that the diversification of the voting body for the Academy is paying off in predictable but satisfying ways. I think that, the notion that you have, multiple films of a foreign language competing for the top prize is really exciting. When before that was very much a novelty. Obviously Parasite has set a precedent for such a film winning. But I think that you're going to see more of that moving forward with the more diverse body. Overall, I thought the nominees were good. I think that the notion that, it's like the old guard, new guard, you're going to see that, I think, a little more. With all due respect to Annette Bening, who has been great in some of the movies for which she's been nominated in the past and lost so many times. Nyad is not a good movie. She is okay in it. Jodie Foster is okay in it. I don't know that either of those performers are capable of giving less than an okay performance.
Right.
But I think that's where you're seeing kind of that digging the heels in, kind of from the old guard there to say, we have our champions too. We don't all want to watch Poor Things and Past Lives. And so it'll be interesting to see how that shift kind of, moves in the next few years. I think the last thing I would say about it is it's crazy to me that it's not even until March 10th.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Which is
Jesus.
It's insane that it's that far away, because the nominations have been out for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we have like another 6 to 7 weeks before it's even on. So
I know in years past it's been in like the late February in recent years.
Yeah, I don't know why they've moved it. I'm sure they have their reasons, but man, it's just, look, man, by March 10th, the last thing I'm thinking about is 2023's movie.
Oh, absolutely. I was talking to
you.
Yeah, it was either Brent or Sam in a previous episode, or maybe it was off mic, but by the time the Oscar nominations come out, it's like I've already done my year in review episode. I've already done my write up and everything. I'm like, I'm digging into 2024 movies. Yeah.
I acknowledge, though, too, you and I are in a different position than most folks. Like, obviously,
That's
a
true.
lot of those films are starting to see a wider release now because of the Oscar nomination profile. But even so, I would think even for, just everyday moviegoers, by March 10th, especially with things like Oppenheimer and Barbie, people are like, that was literally almost a year ago.
Absolutely. And plus, when you have like movies like Maestro and other movies that are basically that have already been accessible to people in like December with streaming releases and but I'm overall pretty happy with the nominations myself. I haven't really dug into them too much, but the Best Picture race is pretty interesting because, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know if they've actually changed this, but I know that they have the rule where it can be up to 10 nominees. But I feel like the last few years it has been the max 10 nominees each year.
Yeah,
I don't know if they've changed that.
No, it's a maximum of 10 still.
Okay.
I do know. They have had years where they've had 8 and 9, but I think you're right. I think they have usually in the last several years just had the full 10.
Yeah.
I don't know what voting tweaks, took place or didn't take place that have caused that variation. But yeah, my guess is they'll probably stick with the full 10 moving forward. I think that's probably a thing of the diverse pool of voting folks too. You probably have, more people pushing their favorites to at least get nominated. But But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's not that I don't care about the Oscars anymore. I guess it's just to the point where it's like I don't write prediction articles. I used to have to write those all the time. Like I just it got to the point where, like, you know, by the time they were on, I was sort of like, I don't even really enjoy watching these. So it's like, I watch them. I do enjoy it. Like, I keep up with it. But you know, I guess I sort of have a distance from it. And maybe it's just kind of like you said, it's like our cycle of watching these. It's like, you know, we're so far beyond that in terms of what we've done, what we're thinking about, what we're going to do. So it's just kind of a weird, again, it's like, you know, time, flat circle, etc.
Absolutely. So, and the funny thing is, like, that kind of is a good segue into the next thing I have. But like our cycle of watching things, as you said, it's like, the nominations, granted, at this point they've been out for a couple of weeks and everything, but the actual ceremony isn't until next month. And like today Netflix unveiled its slate for the rest of the year, basically. And like that put me into a mode where I'm like, okay, which one of these are going to be like ones that I'm going to want to do for like secondary reviews on the podcast? Which ones are these are going to be ones that I'm going to want to write reviews for and do like Patreon stuff or like all of this? And I'm just like, the Oscars are just like the furthest from my mind right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, that's a casualty too. You know, I mean, we talk about the 24-hour news cycle. I mean, that's you know, it's not just politics, it's entertainment too. I mean, and you know, that's certainly a case like that. I think it's funny, you know, you brought up Netflix announcing its slate. They have like 50 movies, whereas Disney has like 10. And that's like all Disney, like Disney, Fox. They might squeeze like a couple more in there, but it's just so funny, like how like that has shifted. You know, granted, you know, not very many of those Netflix movies are ones I personally would like to see. No offense to Lindsay Lohan, who's in two of them that I saw on the list. But
and of course, no offense to Woody Woodpecker.
Right. Yeah, like there's a Woody Woodpecker animated movie coming to Netflix now.
I mean, I would love to see like what kind of market research, what kind of algorithmic stuff went into like thinking like we need a Woody Woodpecker movie.
I guess I don't know what kind of like brand penetration Woody Woodpecker has with, you know, the children under 10. I'm gonna guess pretty low, but you know, alliterative name, funny looking bird, kind of timeless, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm sure that's what Netflix is thinking.
Absolutely. Any other movies from the big Netflix unveiling that pop out to you or are on your radar?
There were a lot that just kind of seemed like the same plots of things that they've already done. Like, you know, I mean, due respect, like if it's working for them, fine. There weren't really any that jumped out. I guess I did see that this was sort of after their initial dump of announcements that Will Ferrell has a documentary that he did with a friend of his who came out as a trans woman. And I saw that Netflix also announced that they're going to be streaming that. And so he embarks on a road trip with his friend. So I'm curious to see that. There's stuff in there that sounds like it'll be fun. Certainly. There was one. I can't remember. There was like 50 of them, and I did sort of spin through them, and I added them, of course, to, you know, like our site's prep list for things. But there was one. I remember there was one that I just kind of chuckled where it was like Jennifer Lopez as like a you know, versus AI, and I'm like, okay, you know. There was one with Jamie Foxx and Cameron Diaz as, you know, spies brought back in the game. And it's like that particular movie has been on streaming like 53 times.
Oh,
like,
it's
come on.
It's nuts. Of course, we also have Rebel Moon Part 2 coming.
I don't know. I haven't watched Rebel Moon Part 1 because I'm just going to watch whatever version Zack Snyder says is his preferred version. Whatever they put it on there.
Also, there is the latest in a long line of true, like, fictionalized corporate things. Unfrosted, the Pop-Tart story. The directorial debut of Jerry Seinfeld.
I mean, I guess that's one of those where if it's sort of BSing if it's like a quasi-fictitious story about the launch of the Pop-Tart and it's Jerry Seinfeld. That could be kind of funny. I mean, I wouldn't hold up B movie as any sort of like unsung classic, but I think it's, as far as kids films from that era go, that's one of the better ones. And so, I don't know if Jerry Seinfeld wants to riff on Pop-Tarts on Netflix's time, I'll watch that. We'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll see if I see. I'm so burnt out on that type of movie because
there's
it's
a lot of those
insane.
Too.
Yeah, it's just there's just so many. Like even like there are like a couple of different I think it's Ava Longoria made one.
Flamin' Hot.
Yeah, Flamin' Hot.
One.
Yeah, and then there was the other one that recently came out that I think was about hot sauce or something. I don't know, but it's just a very crowded market.
I think what you're saying, Matt, is the Beanie Bubble has popped on that particular type of movie.
It has. It is time for another subgenre of movie to come in and put it out of its misery like the iPhone did to the BlackBerry.
Yes. Yeah. BlackBerry being one of the few movies in that subset that's good.
Yeah. I really enjoyed BlackBerry. That's like the exception that proves the rule for me.
Yep.
Yeah. But my final piece of news before we get into the reviews tonight is something that I saw just recently before recording, was that Brad Pitt will be in Quentin Tarantino's The Movie Critic. How do you feel about this reunion of Quentin and Brad?
Well, I mean, I think the two previous films they've done together are certainly among my favorites of Quentin Tarantino's.
Same.
I'm sure Brad Pitt doesn't mind since he won an Oscar for the second one of those. It'll be interesting to see. Quentin Tarantino says this is his final movie, his 10th movie or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, believe that when I see it. It's one of those, like, of all of his movies, this seems like the one that probably is the most esoteric in that, like, how is that going to escape kind of the bubble of people who would just go see something because it's a Quentin Tarantino movie, and people who either love the subject matter, love the genre, love who's in it. Like, I mean, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was not a movie that had like mass appeal, but it did as a subject. But it did because it had Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, and Margot Robbie in it. You know, I mean, if you're making a movie about a guy who watches movies, you're going to have to cast that really well.
Yeah.
But hey, Brad Pitt looks exactly like us. So
exactly.
That's right there.
It's a burden too, because like I get stopped in the street and I'm like, no, why? No, it's not.
Please, ma'am, I am not Brad Pitt.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I will go see anything Quentin Tarantino makes. I think it'll be interesting to see if and how this sort of breaks that bubble of like his inner movie nerd in a way that like a lot of his movies have. He's been shrewd about making them do that. So I have every confidence he will here. I just think it feels like a tougher path maybe for this one.
Yeah, it definitely seems, not knowing obviously not knowing like what direction he's going to go in with it or how he's going to handle it. It kind of feels like my kind of assumption is that it might be, if not like not an inverse, but like kind of the opposite of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where that's kind of this love letter to old Hollywood and changing of the guard and things of that nature. This could be something that's a little bit more critical of something that he is so very much entrenched in, obviously, and passionate about. But yeah, and this is just not anything to like to dig into or anything, but the whole like, oh, it's my 10th movie, it's going to be my last one. Like I have never really cared about that. Like I know people are like, oh, he has 2 movies left or he has like 3 movies left. It's like, okay, like that's not, I don't get, like, that just seems like such a weird, like, stunty thing to do. Like, it just, it doesn't really resonate with me.
Yeah. And just the idea that nothing's ever really dead in terms of entertainment, right? I mean, you know, look, man, I saw the Eagles on their Farewell One tour the same summer that Bend It Like Beckham came out.
Oh, wow.
And they're still out there. So, like, you know, I think that's, I think he'll do more than 10.
Yeah,
Maybe he'll prove us wrong on that too. We'll see.
Oh, yeah. I just think that someone who is so passionate about his craft and his art and what he does, I don't see someone spending decades of their life doing something and creating art like that with a preconceived end date and have them be like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to no longer do the thing that I'm most passionate about and was born to do.
Right.
It just seems a little weird.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I look forward to whatever he does for however long he chooses to do it. So.
Same. And I will go ahead and say it right now. You specifically are invited back to review his 11th movie, whenever it may be.
We'll make that happen.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll make him eat crow.
Exactly.
The 11th movie, which will probably also have Brad Pitt in it. So.
Probably. Yeah. And feet, of course.
Yes.
So that's all the news and stuff that I have for us. Are you ready to go into our first review of the night, Nick?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. So as I said at the top of the episode, we're going to be reviewing Argylle, which is the new Matthew Vaughn movie. We're going to do a non-spoiler review followed by a spoiler review. I will break up those sections with a clip from the trailer before we go into spoilers later. But if you want to navigate around that in the episode, check the show notes for timestamps, which those timestamps can also be found at obsessiveviewer.com/OV414. And so having said that, let's go into our non-spoiler review for Argylle, which is currently in theaters. It opened on February 2nd. The premise, according to IMDb, is a reclusive author who writes espionage novels about a secret agent and a global spy syndicate realizes the plot of the new book she's writing starts to mirror real-life events in real time. Director was Matthew Vaughn. Writer was Jason Fuchs. And the cast includes Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, Henry Cavill, John Cena, Dua Lipa, Bryan Cranston, Sophia Boutella, Catherine O'Hara, and Samuel L. Jackson. So, Nick, we went to a screening a couple nights ago, and so we've had time for it to simmer. I wrote a review on obsessiveviewer.com, just a quick plug for that. And I believe Evan wrote the review for Midwest Film Journal.
Yes.
Nice.
Uh-huh.
So, Nick, in non-spoilers, what were your expectations for Argylle, and how did you feel about the movie?
Well, I'm probably a Matthew Vaughn apologist, I guess. Kingsman, the first Kingsman, most people enjoyed. It was a big hit. The second Kingsman, The Golden Circle, not as big of a hit, not as beloved. But I still liked it. It was very much kind of like the send up of the James Bond excesses, I guess, like the kind of corny 80s excesses, where you look, when you have your movie, conclude in a, overgrown jungle utopia that Julianne Moore has like created, in her ideal image of the world, set to an Elton John song, while Elton John is also fighting in this sequence.
That's right.
You're playing with house money at that point. And I think Matthew Vaughn does a good job of that. I even like The King's Man, which is the World War I prequel to Kingsman, which establishes how the Kingsman Society was set up. I remember seeing that, which they, it was sort of a pandemic casualty. They eventually sort of scuttled it into movie theaters, around Christmas. And I just remember going to see it and thinking, like, this is one of the most perversely non-action-y things I've ever seen, but I really enjoyed it. It has kind of a big action climax, but it was just more of like a historically speculative drama about World War One in a lot of ways, like with Matthew Vaughn being cheeky and having Rasputin flirting with Ralph Fiennes and so on and so forth. So going into this, I sort of felt like, I really like the Kingsman stuff. That stuff seems perpetually on hold. Every 6 months, somebody says, oh, Matthew Vaughn's got a great idea for it. It's like, yeah, I don't know if anybody's going to give Matthew Vaughn any more money for that stuff. So on its face, Argylle kind of seemed to me like a way for him to do something that was Kingsman-esque in ways that are, very superficial, but kind of like stay on the radar, I guess. I think the $200 million figure being floated for this movie, I think that's how much Apple paid for like the licensing and the rights and all that stuff to eventually stream it and develop other things. I think the movie obviously cost a considerable amount of money, but I think they made it and then Apple bought it and struck this deal with Universal to release it, theatrically. So there's, a lot of, corporate accountants, employed to make that money work. So, my thought was, here's him kind of keeping his hat in the ring. He's able to command still, an excellent cast as evidenced by the litany of names you mentioned, Oscar winners, Emmy winners, all-timers like Samuel L. Jackson. So, yeah. And I went into it thinking, if this is kind of fun, I can accept that. It's PG-13, so I knew it wasn't going to hit hard like a lot of his films do, which I think is part of the appeal to me, is that they sort of puncture their kind of candy-colored approach with like extreme violence at times. Like to a degree that it's often meant to be funny. So yeah, I guess I sort of had modest expectations, and like Sam Rockwell's character, I'm allergic to cats. So, more of a dog person. Kingsman has dogs. Argylle has cats. So
that's fair. Yeah.
Maybe that sort of tempered my expectation too. So nothing against cats. I'm just wildly allergic to cats. That's fair. That is fair. I of course don't want to send a cat in your orbit too on the podcast.
Yeah. Eventually she'll come up here and she'll be my producer and lay down next to me, but not yet.
Scowl at me like, why do you have this person on?
Exactly. But yeah, and for me, I was kind of just, my expectations for it were just pretty. I was expecting to enjoy it for what it was, which seemed like a just fun early of the year release action spy movie. And it's funny because like leaving the theater, I thought like, yeah, this is a perfectly acceptable 3-star movie. Like what the biggest delineation that I'll have, or the biggest problem that I'll have, is deciding whether or not to put a heart on it on Letterboxd or not. But in writing my review, I tend to do this sometimes, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I ended up talking myself down to 2.5 stars. Because as it settled, like there was just a lot of things that I found to be just very lackluster. And in the moment, a lot of it was, or rather a lot of the energy was just kind of fun and good for me in the moment. But as basically as soon as the credits rolled, I was just like, yeah, okay, I'm probably going to forget about this movie. I'm probably not going to be, it's not something I'm going to revisit when it hits Apple TV Plus or whatever. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but also as I kind of picked it apart a little bit in my brain in the hours that followed, I was just kind of just a little bit left thinking that it felt like the type of I want to say you or Evan may have said this in the theater, but it seemed like a sanitized Matthew Vaughn action movie.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And definitely
I don't know whether that was part of the deal that he struck. You know, who knows? But I mean, it won't fool anybody. I mean, I think even like people with casual memories of Kingsman will remember like how bloody those movies are.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
If they watch this, they're going to be like, Yeah, there's, like there are literally moments where like people get shot in the head and there's like no blood.
None. And like
I'm
there,
like, okay.
yeah, and like I'm not someone who gets hung up on like, oh, it's PG-13, so it's
Right,
inherently
yeah.
not going to be good because of that. But like it felt like there was just not enough effort in making it a PG-13 action movie. It was more like, okay, well, we can't have blood here, so we'll just have like ragdoll effects of people running, like falling down, and
Right.
just hope that it makes sense in the edit. And I'm just like, it took me out of the movie a few times, and I don't know. And then on top of that, the kind of overall that the whole plot of it, like you mentioned when we were talking about the Netflix movies, that a lot of those movies are the same movie over and over again. And like this felt like how many like espionage action movies do we have where it's a fish out of water, normal person brought into this,
Right.
and then it's just like that is such a played out thing. And what this movie does in a somewhat unique way is uses her kind of perspective as a writer who has written this fiction. And so there's like interspersed with like her visions of Henry Cavill as Argylle, interspersed with Sam Rockwell just kicking ass. And like, that's interesting. But then, and I have to be delicate here, but like when the movie kind of gets going a little bit deeper in the plot, it just kind of turns into a completely other, equally derivative spy plot line. And it's just, it just didn't do anything too groundbreaking for me.
It's funny because I know, obviously we'll have a spoiler portion.
Yeah.
It's extremely difficult to talk about what does and does not work about this movie without going into that.
Yeah.
I will say, I think the moments that I liked most about it, once it kind of got to where it was going, as we'll reveal in a bit. I think probably to me, kind of the vibe that it aspired to was one similar to a movie that came out, I think this might have been 2010 already, Night and Day with Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz.
I never saw it, but I know.
Which I mean, it's like a it's like sort of a romance, sort of a comedy. It's set against this backdrop of espionage where, she's like an everyday person brought into it. He's like the potentially crazy, spy that's bringing her along for this ride. I think Night and Day is a better, more confident application of that idea than Argylle. But the things that I liked most about it generally had to do with the fact that Sam Rockwell and Bryce Dallas Howard are not the typical personalities or like just their physical build is not the same as you would typically see. And they sort of play off of that too in the movie, right? With like where you see like Henry Cavill is like the, like the traditionally chiseled spy, and John Cena is like his muscular, his muscular sidekick in the the dramatization of the books. And I think that to me, what maybe sets this apart and is probably its biggest asset, and I think for me kind of got it through some of the wobbly story parts, were just those two have good chemistry together. They're both kind of goofs. Like they really like amp up their their comic response to things. Rockwell has been dancing in movies, for a quarter century now, and he does it here, and it's always funny. So I think it part of the problem with this movie too is and I don't know, it's in theaters, so it's theatrical first and streaming second, but it was by and large conceived as something for Apple TV Plus to stream at some point and spin off into all manner of, TV shows or straight to streaming movies, what have you. But this movie feels like it has like 4 endings.
Yeah.
Which is a common problem of streaming movies. It's also 2 hours and 19 minutes long, which is not longer really than the Kingsman movies, but boy, does it just feel longer.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because there's ultimately less going on here. that, you know, they try to spin it out into like good moments for everybody in the cast. Which, you know, I mean, Bryan Cranston has some really great moments in this. Catherine O'Hara has some really great moments in this. Samuel L. Jackson sits and watches the movie kind of like we do for most of the movie. But
which
you know,
is such a testament to him that he can be just as entertaining, just sitting in front of screens as he is in anything.
I guess, you know, I know we're not in the spoiler portion yet. I guess maybe not a spoiler. Like Samuel Jackson literally spends half of the time he's in the movie watching a Lakers game and clapping.
Yep.
Like they cut away to him multiple times watching the Lakers game and clapping.
Yep.
So there you go. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's fizzy. It's got, you know, it's got some pop and some energy that I think, you know, especially kind of their chemistry kind of carries it through the back half. You know, once it kind of puts its cards on the table. So yeah, I mean, not one of my absolute favorites of his, but you know, I still had a good time with it. I think compared to like the, you know, oh my God moments of some of the Kingsman movies, it does not hold up in that regard.
I definitely agree. And to your point about it being 2 hours and 19 minutes and feeling that runtime, it's so bizarre to me because the movie is there are different sections of the movie where it transitions into different, like a completely different movie. There's enough content on paper for this to be worthy of that 2 hour and 19 minute runtime. Like even in the first like half of the movie before, as you put it, before they put their cards on the table, when we're seeing like the entire prologue of the movie is like in universe, like in the book, visualization of what she's writing. And like, there's that, and then there's her whole thing in the first part, and then the rest of the movie. And like the sum of all of those parts, even with that amount of story and content, it still feels a little bit like it drags at multiple parts because in the grand scheme of things, I just wasn't engaged with really any of that stuff. Like it was fun and energetic in parts and definitely has that signature like Matthew Vaughn style and visual kind of set pieces and everything, even if it does look very shoddy with some of the CGI. And like I don't know if that's a budget thing. I don't know if that's a like made for streaming thing or if that's a product of, you know, pandemic stuff too, but like there were moments when like there's not to get into spoilers or anything, but there's like a moment where the cat, which figures into the plot pretty heavily in the beginning, is written basically out of the movie for a bit.
Right.
And
it's like the weirdest thing.
It is the weirdest thing. And like on one hand, I was like, okay, that's dumb. Like I don't like that. I don't follow that as like a suitable way to like remove this cat from the movie for a stretch. And on the other hand, I'm like, maybe it's good because I don't have to see this just like almost a 3D animated like Pixar cat in the movie because it looks that just far away from real life.
It's funny too because like I know how much you love your cat. And I feel like anybody like who, you know, is a responsible you know, pet parent like will like I could feel like the air shift around you.
Oh yeah.
Like in the moment where they like take the cat out of the story, like, you know, nothing terrible happens to the cat.
Right.
We'll tell people that now, but it's just like the way that the cat is removed from the story. I was just like, nobody would make that decision.
Yeah. Everything else that happens in the movie, I'm following along. I'm good. That's the moment where I had like the biggest like problem suspending my disbelief. Like I'm like, you can't, like that's not
right.
That's
it was very bizarre.
Yeah.
It was almost like okay, people have folded all of their laundry by now watching this.
Yes.
We need to move along to whatever the big reveal is, and then where we're taking it from there. Like,
exactly.
It was really kind of how it felt.
Absolutely. And Yeah. And on that note, should we move on to? We finished folding our laundry. Should we move on to spoilers?
I think so.
All right. Well, we are going to go into spoilers. We're going to talk about the real Agent Argylle. Here, once again, check show notes for timestamps if you want to navigate away, but I'm going to play a clip from the trailer for Argylle. Once again, it is playing in theaters and it will have a release on Apple TV Plus at some point. Before we go into spoilers, Nick, what did you rate it on Letterboxd?
I gave it a 3 out of 5.
Nice.
Yeah, I was like you. I mean, it was kind of back and forth. I mean, I think ultimately the energy of the cast. I think there's enough good bits for them to play. And the movie. I think Matthew Vaughn knows this isn't like, Kingsman level, investment for him, I mean, so, a fun kind of knockoff-ish element of that. So I went with a 3 out of 5.
Nice. Yeah, I can't dispute that at all. I had it at a 3.5 or a 3 stars, but now it's at 2.5. So that's where I landed on it. But we're going to go into spoilers. Here's a clip from the trailer for Argylle. When we come back, we're going to be spoiling the movie.
There's a cat in there. Oh my God, you're Ellie friggin' Conway.
Author of Argylle series, Ellie Conway.
I am such a fan.
Oh yeah? What is it you do?
Espionage.
Would you sign my book?
Here we go. I love this book.
All right, so spoilers on for Argylle. Nick, where do you want to begin with the spoiler section on this review?
Well, you might as well, to use the parlance of the movie, I guess, let the cat out of the bag.
Yes.
So
or leave it just
right.
with dead bodies,
or leave it with a bunch of dead bodies that are about to come in, and there's no promise that they will leave the cat alive.
Right.
I think that was the thing that I felt the air change around you. I'm like,
yeah,
are you gonna just kill this cat?
Right. I was like, God damn it. Okay.
Which again, they don't. Cat makes it. Cat survives.
Yeah.
So the entire marketing campaign for this movie, which has had one trailer that has played before pretty much every movie that I've seen for the last 4 months.
Yes.
Ends with Samuel L. Jackson promising, introducing to the real Agent Argylle. So the real Agent Argylle is Bryce Dallas Howard's character, whose first initial is R and whose real last name is Kyle. And so the premise is that she has this past life of being a spy for an agency that turns out to be bad, rather than the good deeds that they thought they were doing, and she has been writing these novels as a way to arrive at a nugget of information that the bad guys need. And her writer's block happens to intersect with the one point where she gets to the information that they need and want. And so, there's lots more complications from there that involve, Bryan Cranston being her dad, but not being her dad.
Right.
Catherine O'Hara being her mom, but not being her mom. There's a lot of, kind of things folded into that. But then the movie from that point becomes her teaming up with Sam Rockwell, who was her partner in the past and knew her as, Rachel Kyle, to solve this mystery, to do away with the bad guys. It's really funny because my wife and I are currently, she'd never seen the series. I had watched it when it was on. We're doing we're watching Alias.
That's
the series, the TV series. And when it was over, I said, so it's like season 3 of Alias, where she's figuring out the 2 years that she lost. Season 2 of Alias ends with a big time jump. She wakes up and it's 2 years later and she doesn't know what has happened. And so, so it's like season 3 of Alias where they resolve that, crossed with The Long Kiss Goodnight, which is another movie with Samuel L. Jackson where a woman realizes that she used to be, a super spy and relies on him to, help her figure that out in a way. And the funniest thing is, like I said, it's like you can't even really talk about the movies that Argylle feels like,
right,
or anything else that it feels like, other than like Kingsman, which is very just much a visual thing, without like just completely giving away where it goes. And so I think, you know, now that we put that out there, and the spoiler thing kind of picking up from something that I said before, you know, Bryce Dallas Howard is not the sort of action hero that you know, traditionally see.
Right.
And I think the thing that really kept it going for me in that second half was they come up with some fun and creative ways, you know, and she, I mean, I think there's some element of like actual, you know, physicality to it that she's bringing. You know, it's not just all doubles or digital. I mean, there's some aspect of her doing these things. You know, that kept it fun for me. You know, like Sam Rockwell, you know, like, I don't mean this disrespectfully, he's kind of a schlubby dude. Like, you know, he's, you know, watching him do that too was really fun. I guess I cared, like you, it's like, I didn't care about the spy plot aspect of it. I liked watching them kind of realize and remember these things about each other because they had a good chemistry. You know, also like The Long Kiss Goodnight, there is a skating action sequence, although this one takes place in a pool of oil that that Bryce Dallas Howard is somehow able to jam knives into her boots and skate. And I mean, that's probably the most like Kingsman-y portion to me. Yes. You know, but I think, as you noted, it's not as good as it could have been because it's just so defanged and you're almost like watching for, you know, okay, like this eruption of violence here, and like when you don't see it, it just kind of like, well, it does two things. It takes away from, I think, what Matthew Vaughn is good at as an action filmmaker, and two, it's just like you're not invested in it. Like you know, this is like a parlor trick almost, right? So yeah, I mean, you know, obviously they've built up this big thing. Like there were, you know, internet theories that Taylor Swift was the real Agent Argylle. You know, people thought it was going to be like the cat with Ryan Reynolds' voice or something. You know,
I hadn't heard that theory. Jesus.
Yeah, I had read that somewhere. But I mean, ultimately, it's, you know, as Evan noted in his review, it's sort of the most sensible explanation, right? If there's going to be some, you know, kind of big twist. But at the same time, I think it's funny. Like, they basically tell you what it is at the front of the movie. You know, she's at a book reading where she's literally reading the last few pages of her newest book, which I think is really funny. Like, you know, the conceit is that she's like this, you know, globally renowned author now. And, you know, here she is, like, as her new book is being released, reading the end of that book.
Right.
Doesn't make any sense. But somebody asks her, you know, oh, you know, Ian Fleming, Frederick Forsyth, John le Carre, they were all masters of their novels, and they turned out to be actual spies, you know, and it's like, okay, that's probably where this is going.
Yeah. I didn't pick that up as a breadcrumb at all. It wasn't in my mind at all, but
sure. And it's pretty early in the movie. It's like you're kind of getting oriented and
but like it's kind of a weird kind of double-edged sword, because I appreciate to an extent that they went with a, I guess, more realistic way to explain that, you know, she's telling, like, she's speaking, like, she's writing about actual things. But then they also have, like, just a couple of, like, outlandish things, like the whole ice skating with knives thing on oil. And the whole, like, shooting Sam Rockwell in the chest and having, like, the like missing, like, point, like whatever they called it, like the backdoor heart ventricle,
the ventricle chamber or something like that. Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, that's all right.
I will say that reminded me a little bit of, like, you know, the thing in Kingsman where Colin Firth gets shot in the head. And then in the second movie, they're like, oh, we were able to get to him right away with a giant bubble that we put over his head that, like, prevented him from dying. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of Kingsman-esque.
That's right. Yeah.
That's kind of funny.
That's fair.
But I think that's one of those things too, Matt, where that happened, and she had the reveal where she was like, she's pretending to be bad, right? Like she's, she does the big I sent the files to Samuel L. Jackson. Like I thought, okay, well, the movie's going to end now. And then there was like 40 minutes left. And I was like, okay, well then, now we're going to skate on the oil and that'll be the end of the movie. And it's like, no, there's 20 minutes left.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? How much more of this can there be? And again, it's like, I appreciated having time with those actors and those performances, but just after a while, it was just like, I've seen, I'm sure you have too, like countless streaming movies that just do not know where to end. And it's like, I've watched 3.5-hour movies that flew by. It's not a question of how long it is. It's just a question of, how well it's engaging that story and those performances. And it's just like, there was kind of a moment where I was like, okay, we're going to wrap this up. Like, they showed the boat exploding in the preview. So that's going to happen. So, that's going to happen in the next 20 minutes. So,
and like telegraphing the partner coming back and that, it just felt like as much as the twists and turns were built around being things that would be like, groundbreaking and or earth shattering in the movie, none of them landed with that effect for me. Like even the real Agent Argylle thing just felt like, okay, what she's either an amnesia patient or brainwashed, and she was brainwashed. Okay, fine. And then I felt like the plot with the hacker, like her backstory and everything, it was convoluted for me because I feel like they didn't do enough to establish like what exactly the MacGuffin of it all was. And then I also just didn't care, and it just felt like, it's the Bourne Identity thing. Okay, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, and like the other thing it has in common with Alias too is them kind of realizing, they thought they were, working for the good guys. So it turns out they were actually working for, terrorists.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it has that too, but like you said, it's so convoluted. It's almost like once they reveal it, it's like, well, we have to justify the next 70 minutes of what we're doing here.
Right.
So we're going to have to lay on really thick, like they also treated like a big moment where like she looked at the files, like, all of the terrible shit that people had done, in the name of this organization. They treat it like a big, like, reveal that she's on the list. Right. It's like, well, of course you would be on the list.
Duh.
It was very weird. The way that they kept it moving to that, 2-hour, 20-minute mark.
And go ahead. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would be very curious to know what the process was in terms of writing the movie and getting it into production, because like it's come out on social media, like the press release for the announcement of the movie like 3 years ago was that she was going to play a secret agent who has no memory or something. And it's like, they gave it away right there. And like, at what point did they decide to make that the major like twist of the movie? At what point did they make that the crux of the storyline? At what point in production? Because everything else just feels like just very loosely set around it. Like I said, it just doesn't have that weight to it.
Sure. Yeah. So the other thing I was going to say, we see this all the time. We joke about it. It's like, credit cookies for movies that will never get made.
Yes.
Right. Like people they've cast in roles that were probably like, oh my God, this is my big break. Like Joe Manganiello as Deathstroke.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you're never going to see him again. This movie has what has to be like without like on its face, like in the moment, like the most confusing credit cookie that I have ever seen.
Yes.
Because for starters, it takes place at a pub called the King's Man.
Right.
And I heard people like rows behind us, like losing their mind at the notion that it was going to cross over with Kingsman, which, you know, like completely different studio. I'm sure Disney is not going to want to make that happen with Apple TV and Universal, but who knows? And I think I have sussed out that it is supposed to be the younger version of Henry Cavill, who shows up as a real person at the end of the movie, and presumably a real spy. Yeah. So it's a younger version of a character we've just seen 30 seconds earlier, being in trouble and getting inducted into this like spy thing. And then it says Argylle Book 1, the movie, coming soon. And so I think what the plan will be is like on Apple TV Plus, or maybe in theaters if this is a hit, who knows, like that young explanation of, I was just like, this is insane. Like who, like, I had to talk it over. Like I was like, what the hell was that? Like, I didn't get it in the moment. I'm like, okay, this has to be what it is. But like, I'm thinking like that's going to like make people just like, what?
Yeah, I didn't even put together the whole Argylle, the Book 1, the movie thing. Like, it's like, it's such a weird, like, rabbit hole of disconnected things in a very short succession of time.
Right.
Like,
it's like trying to like mythologize your property before people have even experienced it.
Yes.
It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah. And
the
even
weirdest thing to me.
And even like the reveal of Henry Cavill, it's like he doesn't look like the Argylle that she has visions of. He just looks like kind of like a schlubby version of himself to an extent.
He has a Danny McBride haircut. I thought maybe it's going to be Danny McBride or something. When they showed him from the back, I was like, that'd be pretty funny. But
weird.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I'm going to guess this movie's not going to do all that well. It will probably do well on Apple TV Plus, which is kind of the ideal spot to watch it, right? Like, if you get a little bored with it, you can pause it, you can get some food, you can come back to it, you can finish it later. I mean, it's like, you know, for better or worse, a lot of streaming films are made that way. Yeah. It's just how it is. You know, I sort of joked with Evan in the parking lot. I'm like, so is this going to be like Matthew Vaughn's version of like Army of the Dead with Zack Snyder on Netflix, where they had like a completely superfluous prequel with like one of the thieves from Army of the Dead?
That's
like,
right.
That like nobody, you know, it's like nobody gives a crap about that stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, that also feels like the other thing I said was, I think ultimately the goal of that credit cookie is to get people to watch The King's Man, because it was just sort of abandoned in movie theaters. Like Matthew Vaughn reminding people like, hey, I made a third Kingsman movie. You probably didn't see it. Please go watch it.
That is the best theory that I've heard about that. Cause like, I can't like make sense of it, even with like it just feels like a nothing thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah. Overall thoughts, it's fine. Like you said, it's a finely streamable movie. It's better than some other spy movies that are similar to it. It's better than Ghosted. For sure. That's for sure. But yeah, I just feel like it could have been so much more if it made any sense, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things like it's very much a like enjoyable in the moment, doesn't really hold up to like any kind of scrutiny, which again, like, you know, neither do the Kingsman movies,
right?
Frankly, I mean, so it's like, it's really not that, like, that shouldn't be the barometer, you know, to judge it. But I think it lacks like those distinctive qualities that Matthew Vaughn brings to things.
Exactly.
In a way that like makes it kind of stand on its own, apart from, you know, the way there's a lot of, you know, pastel colored smoke that resembles, you know, the heads exploding at the end of Kingsman.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it's very much like a PG-13 version of that scene.
Exactly. And like that sequence worked so well for me, specifically because the different colors of the smoke and everything concealed the fact that there's no blood or anything. Like, that's the correct way to do that. And then right from there, it's like, okay, we're going to go ice skating and like cut a bunch of people without any
blood whatsoever. Well, maybe the oil absorbed all the blood immediately.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's fair.
No, I'm not that deep of a Matthew Vaughn apologist. So, I mean, again, fun movie, enjoyable. I think, ultimately, it will be like a medium profile blip in the streaming world. Like, I don't see this becoming like, a franchise for any of it, really. I mean, somebody said there's like an actual Argylle book. It's like, that's about the last thing I'm interested in reading.
Right. And that was also speculated to have been ghostwritten by Taylor Swift, which sure.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, hey, maybe all the people who think that Taylor Swift is a big psyop on the NFL will really, really like the twist in this movie.
Yes.
I don't know.
Jesus. But yeah, we can wind down with our review. Overall, like I don't really recommend it. I recommend it as like a rainy day streaming movie. I don't see it as something worthy of going to the theater for, which is a big indictment of it in and of itself, I think. Yeah. Yep. Do you want to go ahead and do our secondary review? Which,
sure. Yeah.
All right. We're going to talk about David Ayer's The Beekeeper. There's a little bit in spoilers that I would want to touch on here, but this can be a brief review. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring us into a non-spoiler review, and then we can go into spoilers, of course. The Beekeeper is available on PVOD right now, as of January 30th. It is also in theaters. The premise is one man's brutal campaign of vengeance takes on national stakes after he is revealed to be a former operative of a powerful and clandestine organization known as Beekeepers. Director was David Ayer. Writer was Kurt Wimmer. And the cast includes Jason Statham, Emmy Raver Lampman, Josh Hutcherson, Jeremy Irons, Minnie Driver, and Felicia Rashad. So, Nick, it's been a while since you've seen this, and you wrote a review on Midwest Film Journal. How did you feel about The Beekeeper?
So I've seen 11 movies that were released so far this year. The Beekeeper is still my favorite.
Nice.
Look, I won't pretend that this is a great movie. I will tell you, having seen 40 Jason Statham movies now in my lifetime, this 40? 40, yeah.
Holy crap.
This is one of the better ones. It's up there with the Cranks, the Crank films, I would say, and Wrath of Man, which I also really liked. Oh, yeah. It's funny that we were talking about a Matthew Vaughn movie, because like this is kind of like some of like the things that Matthew Vaughn does really well, which is like an inherently ridiculous premise. Like, because this is also sort of a spy movie in theory, although it's really just, like vengeful ass kicking.
Yep.
But it's so ridiculous. And they keep throwing in even more ridiculous, but completely enjoyable and completely appropriate things for this movie. Right.
Yes.
All the way down to like the last 20 minutes, introduce this guy named Lazarus, who looks like it's like if Seth Rogen played a Hanna-Barbera character who killed people and spoke with a South African accent. It's like where they got this guy. Like as soon as he started talking, like I went to it. They had a sneak preview of this movie before it opened in wide release. And my wife and I went to it. And as soon as this guy started talking, like he's sitting there and he's like playing video games, and he's just like crass and shouting. And like we both just started laughing at like the sheer concept of this character. And he has a great fight scene.
Oh, it's so good.
With Jason Statham toward the end. Like, just a phenomenal fight scene. This movie is dumb. Like people will liken it to John Wick. It's got some of the same people doing some of the fights, so it has some of that same feeling. But like, this doesn't hold a candle to John Wick. It is an incredibly enjoyable, gleefully violent, very funny, and with some just completely absurd twists that are absolutely hilarious. You know, and we can talk a little bit about that in the spoiler sections.
Yeah.
But there's like one thing about it that probably kept it from it being like a 4 out of 5 for me.
Okay.
Like, but it's a solid 3.5 out of 5. But
yeah,
I mean, I think look, when Jason Statham doesn't care, you get like The Expendables 4, which is one of the worst movies from 2023. Then like for this one, it's like clearly he like locked into what it was doing, and this is a perfectly enjoyable Jason Statham movie.
Yeah,
so.
I also rated it 3.5 stars. Like it's definitely an extremely solid movie, and it also kind of satiated some of that, like you said, gleeful violence stuff that I found missing in Argylle. Like there's an elevator scene that just like
a man gets cut in half by an elevator in this movie. So if that sounds good to you, just go for it. The whole movie will delight you.
Yeah, I gasped, and I was just like, I was so caught off guard because it is a violent movie. It is like an R-rated action movie, but it's not like overly violent. Like there are sequences where, like, I mean, he cuts off people's fingers and does all of these other crazy things, but a lot of it's kind of a little bit subdued in some places. There's a whole sequence where he is it's basically like a slasher movie, like horror sequence in a barn with him just dispatching these guys that are coming after him. And I'm like, this is really good. This is a really good combination of just tension and like hopeful violence, because you want to see these people get, just annihilated by this guy. Because the premise is a universal thing. Like, okay, yeah, these people have scammed an old lady, and it's built around this whole premise of people scamming people out of all of their money, and like that's something that is just so digs in deep. I loved it. Yeah.
Well, and I think too. So I mean, there's one moment early on where so they also, like, the funniest thing is like, okay, Jason Statham is a beekeeper. Mm-hmm. His character keeps bees.
Yeah.
But then he also was formerly a beekeeper, capital B, which is like this secret, like moral arbiter of like what's right for America, operating outside the construct of any other law enforcement. It's so funny. But he says, like, preying on old people is like preying on children, only it's worse. And he says something like, children have parents that look out for them. Old people don't have people who look out for them. And, it sounds kind of goofy, like talking about it now. Yeah. But like Statham sells it so well.
He does.
And like you said, I absolutely want to see him burn every last person in this movie down. It's it's very good about just like being effective for like the 2 minutes it needs to be dramatically effective, and then just setting him loose on his quest to murder everybody responsible.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And like, it's even to the point where I like, if I wasn't so entertained by it, I would be poking holes in it. I would be nitpicking the hell out of it. Like, sure. I could have just swayed my entire opinion of the movie on the fact that that the FBI agent, just like the whole fact that her mother, what happens to her mother is just like it doesn't matter to her, or it doesn't resolve. Yeah. It's something that happened. It's like, okay, whatever. Yeah. But then a dude gets cut in half in an elevator, and I'm like, yeah, I'm there. Cool. So
that might be the spoiler break for this one.
I think so too. Yeah. We're going to go into spoilers, a quick spoiler section for The Beekeeper. So check show notes, timestamps, all of that. I'm going to play a clip from the trailer, and then we're going to spoil The Beekeeper.
You stomp his ass out.
You're telling me one man did this. The only thing you know is he's a beekeeper.
A beekeeper? Well, that's not good.
Beekeepers is a special program outside the chain of command.
I protect the hive. When the system is out of balance, I correct it. We have laws for these things.
Until they fail, then you have me.
My fingers, he cut them off. Oh, what the fuck, bro?
So, spoiler.
It's such a like, even without the visuals, like it's just such a great audible sequence of things.
So great. So great. Spoilers on for the Beekeeper. Yes. So I will say one thing. I was a little bit annoyed because the IMDb credits spoil something in the movie that I feel like I would have gotten more enjoyment out of. So it's probably my own fault. As I was watching it, I watched it today, and as I was watching it, I was figuring like, okay, well, I have a very tight time frame before recording, so I might as well just like make sure the notes are all set up and everything. So
sure.
I went to the IMDb page, I started making the notes and everything, and then I saw the credit for, I can't remember the actress's name, but it just said President Danforth, and I was like, why would you put that why would you make that her credited character name?
Yeah. See, and so I mean, we literally saw like a sneak preview before it was out. It hadn't screened, like, so, I had no idea about that going in. So where this goes, Jason Statham promises he's going to take this all the way to the top.
Yeah.
All the way to the top, baby. He's going to take them all down. All the way at the top happens to be the president of the goddamn United States.
Yeah. Which I also feel like the script is so like married to the like analogy to beekeeping and to bees and everything that I feel like literally the only reason why they made the president a woman is so that they could refer to her as the queen bee and refer to him as Queen Slayer and all that.
Right. Yeah. And so like you're probably wondering like what would the president stand to gain from like ripping off old people? Well, the notion is that her ass bag son, played by Josh Hutcherson, has been skimming and contributed to her campaign fund by stealing the life savings of elderly people across the United States. So this all comes out in like mad rushes of exposition from Jeremy Irons and Minnie Driver and a lot of other like great actors that pop up for like 2 minutes that you're like, okay, how did they get them for this?
Right.
So I think the thing like, look, I'm not complaining about that development. I think it's hilarious. It perfectly fits. It perfectly fits for like where they're going. The thing that probably kept, I was like, okay, look, are they going to make a movie that ends with Jason Statham murking the president of the United States because they're like a terrible person? Because I'm like, that would be something. That would be something in any January, let alone an election year January.
Right.
Movie does not go there. But it's still like it's a satisfying ending. I think that's just kind of the thing. That's probably like what kept it from like going through the roof of the theater for me.
Yeah.
And they, but they do like, they do hint that like the president did not know this was happening, and they sort of position her as being kind of this patsy in this plan and all that stuff. The other thing that I thought was really hilarious about this movie is you heard a little bit of it in the trailer there. They position the beekeepers, the agents that as being like they can make a moral decision on their own because they've got the benefit of the country in the back of their mind at all times. Like they are very clear about like that's why they operated and how they operated.
Right.
Okay. So Jason Statham is a former beekeeper. He's retired. He's not doing it anymore. At one point, they call in, quote, the current active beekeeper to kill him. All right. The current active beekeeper is a psychopath with no regard for human life that destroys a gas station and like any number of like people to try to kill him. And it's like, that person's not operating in the best interest of the United States. Like, what a load. Like, I mean, so it's like, the movie kind of tries to do, it does a little bit of like what Argylle does, which is kind of like mythologizing itself like as it's going, but it's also just like so patently ridiculous and enjoyably done that you're kind of like, okay, well, you know, that's kind of a load. Like Jason Statham was a good beekeeper. The rest of these beekeepers are just psychopaths.
Right. And I love that because it sets it up as like, oh, she's going to be like the big bad. This is the first altercation between them. And then he sets her on fire and she's, it's just,
she's gone within like 2 minutes.
I was like, that's great. That's great. And then you said his name was Lazarus at the end.
I only know that from the credits. I don't think they refer to him.
I don't think
as
so
Lazarus,
either. But like that, he has his own lore in the movie. And
I know, right?
It's so good.
He talks about he talks about how he killed a beekeeper, which made me think like, how many beekeepers were there before? Like before or after Jason Statham? Like, you know, like they couldn't have been that good if this guy killed one of them.
Right.
So yeah, they're just like funny stuff like that, but it's like the sort of thing where like you could see them like doing a show, right? Like a spin-off of it where like Jason Statham shows up for like one episode or something, and you know, it's on, you know, streaming on Amazon or something like that. Like, you know, I just, you know, I would be surprised if, you know, at the end of March, you know, that movie is still my favorite movie of 2024, but it is right now. Just so goofy, so enjoyably dumb. Highly recommended if you're in for that sort of thing.
Same here. It's a blast. It's just an absolute blast. Like I didn't care too much about anything going on. I was just along for the ride, and yeah, it was so much fun. Like I kept thinking during like the big finale of it, I kept thinking like how, like, imagine that something like that happened in the real world. Like what would happen to the media? Like what would happen in terms of like what the world perceives of what happened there? And like even it's so bizarre. So much fun.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have anything else on the Beekeeper?
No,
I don't think there's really
that, I mean,
not much.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I guess it was nice to see. So you mentioned David Ayer was the director of this. You know, he sort of you know, broke out with End of Watch a few years back, and sort of specialized in, you know, like this, you know, sort of, you know, corrupt cop or you know, kind of you know, cop in turmoil kind of story. He then did Suicide Squad, which which I think is terrible.
Same.
but he insists a good version of it exists somewhere that you know, people will never see, and he sort of dropped off after that. Also did a very bad streaming movie for Netflix called Bright.
Oh, that's right.
Will Smith as a human cop with Joel Edgerton as his like orc or elf.
I think it was orcs. Yeah, I never saw it, but Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, so David Ayer kind of, you know, fell off of what he was good at. And so, you know, this was just kind of like, okay, this is a big, dumb action movie. Let's get good choreographers in here. You know, let's get people who know how to make punches land and make fights feel real. Yes. Like the moment where he at the end where he's fighting Lazarus, and like they establish that Lazarus has a missing leg from his previous battle with the Beekeeper, not Jason Statham's Beekeeper, but a different one. There's a moment where like Jason Statham like realizes like, oh shit, this guy's got a false leg, and he just like kicks it out, and it like. It's so good. It like happens at like the perfect moment of the fight too.
It does.
So yeah. But I noticed that like there's some of the same names that did John Wick Chapter 4 specifically were involved with the action choreography. So
nice.
You know, the fights and the action sequences are extremely well done. It's just a good like meat and potatoes. Like watch Jason Statham stomp fools. You know, just good stuff. I mean, not challenging. You know, whatsoever, but
absolutely. And sometimes sometimes that's exactly what you need out of an action movie like this. It's just, it's great. It's great. Yeah. So I rated it 3.5 stars. Did you say you rated 3.5 too? Nice.
Also 3.5. Yep.
Nice. Well, maybe someday we'll get more Beekeeper movies. I don't know, but
I think we will. It's done pretty well,
Nice.
surprisingly. I think it's made some decent money worldwide, and I think it's done like
Good.
40 or 50 million here, which for a Statham movie is kind of on the high end if it's not,
Right.
The Meg or, Fast and Furious. So yeah.
40 movies. I don't think I've seen more than maybe 10. And that's
Well,
a pretty big
a
number.
lot of them aren't very good.
Sure.
But like I said, I would put this one up there with among the best of his stuff.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I think he did a good job. He was great
Yeah.
in it. So that's our secondary review of the night, The Beekeeper, and we've got a little bit of time. I do want to do a quick potpourri section if you're good with that, Nick. All right. Awesome.
Yeah, of course.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up the episode with a potpourri section, which is the part of the episode where we kind of wrap things up and talk about stuff we've watched lately, things we're looking forward to, whatever we want, as long as it smells good. And I'm actually going to play a little bit of a stinger to bring us into potpourri.
They tell me I view obsessively.
Which that's just a part of the theme song. So
I want to say too, I think I've told you, I think every time we talk about your podcast, specifically, I can tell you, I love your theme song. I love that you have it. It sounds great.
Oh my God.
The sound is fantastic.
Thank
always
you.
love hearing.
Yes, I adore it. Shout out to Mike, of course, and As Good as It Gets, his band. I remember he and I worked out like the theme song mechanics and everything, and I remember I was in the car with Jess back when she and I were dating, and we were at the a car wash and like in line, and then Mike just sent me a text saying like, hey, I have like a sample of I have a rough cut of the song, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, I know, right? You're like, oh God, what is this gonna be?
Yeah, and like I had all faith that he would be great, that it would be great, just to be clear. But like I listened to it, and it's like a demo version and everything. It's not as polished and everything, and like I felt like chills because it's just so. It was I love it so much. So
it's just such a great when somebody like gets what you wanted, like, and like not only do they nail it, but they like exceed it. It's just like that's such a great feeling, and I'm always like when I hear that song, I'm just like, God damn, they really nailed it. Good work.
Absolutely. So I highly recommend checking out As Good as It Gets on Spotify, everyone. But we are going to go ahead and talk some potpourri. I've got one thing I want to talk about, Nick. Sure. I'll let you go ahead and go first if you have anything. You had mentioned before a series of movies that you watched.
Yeah. We're really getting into the highbrow stuff on this particular episode, aren't we? It's actually kind of a natural segue though, because there's something that the website Vulture has started to do that a certain subset of critics. I'm not part of this subset, but they created this last year. And they were stunt awards. And so the idea was, the Academy Awards still have not as yet created an award for best stunt choreography, which, the drum has been beaten for that, quite strongly within the last 10 years, especially with the John Wick films, all of which would be worthy of such an award. So they've created, categories like, best action film, best fight, best stunt, best vehicle stunt, best stunt that's not in an action film, things like that. So it's just like kind of a fun, cross section of categories. And they opened it up where it's like, hey, if you have some, clear, interest in or experience with, like you can cast your vote in these things if you want. So, I found the contact info for one of the people that helped create this. And, reached out to him and said, hey, here's my credentials, blah, 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 blah. He sent me the ballot. So I'm like looking it over. And there in one of the categories was a movie called Sniper, GRIT, GRIT, which stands for Global Response and Intelligence Team.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay. And I look it up, and it is the 10th movie.
Jesus.
in a franchise that dates back to 1993. Initially, with a movie called Sniper that had Tom Berenger and Billy Zane as like a, seasoned sniper and a young upstart in the jungles in Panama, like, trying to take out, dictators and, drug cabals and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I saw Sniper back in, like 1994 when I rented it or whatever. I'd have been, 14 years old and thought nothing of it for like, frankly, until now. But I was like, it's the 10th movie. I'm like, I could probably watch that movie and weigh in on that fight scene, but like, God damn, why don't I watch all 10?
Yeah, you need the context.
I need the context. So I just finished that one the other day. So think about this. Started in 1993. This one was 2023. They've had 10 movies. I would say most of them have had Tom Berenger in them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they did Sniper 2 and Sniper 3 that were straight to DVD like in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Then in 2011, there was like an 8-year break between the third and the fourth one. They did Sniper Reloaded, which comes up with a phantom son out of nowhere. Like this character never talked about having a kid, but of course he has a kid. He's also a sniper. So then they did that one, and then they did Sniper Legacy, where they brought Tom Berenger back.
Nice.
And reintroduced him to his son. Billy Zane has come back for a few of these. Like, he's not in all of them, but he's in some of them. Okay. Tom Berenger is in some of them, but not all of them. Dennis Haysbert, who was President Palmer on 24.
Of course.
He has been in them for like the last 10 years as like a CIA chief. At one point, Tom Berenger is like the Mr. Nobody character from the Fast and Furious movies, like out of nowhere, like leading a team. It's like, okay, whatever. So most of them are like, in like the 2.5 to like 3-star range, I would say.
Sure.
The 9th one is not very good because they try to get too funny with it. Like they try to like make it like too funny they try to make like an action comedy about sex trafficking, which is like doesn't work.
Yeah.
But this newest one is like, it's weird because I can't imagine anybody would enjoy it as much if they didn't know like the characters coming in, but it's just like a better mix of like a funny, goofy action thing. And they actually get a lot of mileage out of their money for what is essentially a straight to streaming movie. And the fight scene is excellent. It's like, a lot of long take work, good martial arts. So I would say on balance, I'm glad I watched these. I'd say there's really only one that I would put at a 3.5 out of 5. If anyone really cares to know, it's Sniper Ghost Shooter, which is from 2016 and has sort of like a, kind of a drone element to it, but it's done in a way that kind of plays into the sniping aspects and has some good supporting performances. So yeah, maybe I'll watch something that doesn't rot my brain in February, but don't hold your breath. Right.
Nice.
But it's just the sort of thing. It's like, it was almost like there's 10 of these movies. That seems insane to me. That's 30 years of sniper movies.
Yeah.
Let's see what that's about. And I did.
Nice. Maybe I'll dip my hand or dip my toe in that franchise a little bit. I don't know, because it sounds kind of interesting, but yeah, to do a very steep or very, very quick left turn out of action movie stuff.
Sure.
My potpourri, if you want to get out of the February brain rot movie thing, the thing I'm going to bring up is actually a movie that, as of this recording, is going to be opening, I think, in theaters this week. It's Fitting In. It is a movie by filmmaker Molly McGlynn. I believe it's based on her real life story. It's a coming of age drama. She's writer and director for it. The plot is a teen girl is diagnosed with a reproductive condition that upends her plans to have a sex life, propelling her to explore unusual methods. Her relationships are challenged with everyone in her life, but most importantly, herself. I found this movie to be very interesting. I am a sucker for teen coming of age dramas, teen coming of age comedies. This one in particular is pretty strong because, by the way, it stars Maddie Ziegler and Emily Hampshire. They play mother and daughter, and what I found really interesting is that the teenage like dialogue feels very genuine, very, very like authentic, and none of the drama veers into melodrama. Like this girl discovers that she basically was born without a uterus and doesn't have like the correct parts in her, vagina. And it's at a time where she is, coming of age into a woman into adulthood. And meanwhile, her mother is someone who's dealing with, losing her mother. And she also, is a breast cancer survivor in the movie. So there's an interesting, mother-daughter relationship in this movie that plays out in such an authentically dramatic way, that never feels like it never feels like that teenage, angst, conflict between mother and daughter. It just feels like, oh, we're both going through things and we're both not really talking the way that we should, or we're not communicating the way that we should. Through these experiences that we're having, we're going to learn to communicate with each other, and it's going to be repaired. And that's one small part of the movie, because a lot of it is dealing with, Lindy is the character's name, her dealing with, the self-shame that she feels for being born this way, and discovering her identity and figuring out what works for her and who she is as a person, while also going to doctor's appointments and figuring out what she can do in respect to this condition that she's suddenly found herself in. And it's just a really well done coming of age drama that just feels very, very good and authentic for the story being told. And I just really liked it. So it's called Fitting In. Yeah, it is in theaters. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. I always enjoy seeing Emily Hampshire pop up in things.
Same.
Having been a fan of hers on Schitt's Creek. And she's briefly in Self-Reliance. It sounds like she's maybe got more of a meatier role here. So
absolutely,
I'll have to check that out. Thanks for the recommendation.
I definitely recommend it. Absolutely. And I should hopefully have a review on obsessiveviewer.com by the time you guys are listening to this. So if I do, I'll have a link in the show notes. That will do it for this week's episode of the podcast. Nick, thank you so much for joining me today and taking the time to chat with me.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, of course. And before we go, can you tell people where they can find you online and anything you have coming down the pike in terms of reviews and anything?
Yeah, so you can find all of my work at Midwest Film Journal, all one word.com. You can also find my reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. I've got an archive dating back, not quite to the first Sniper, but, only maybe a few years shy of that.
Nice.
And projects coming up, just got more Class of series, more stuff kind of coming to theaters in February. We're going to have some focused series on Russell Crowe, Meryl Streep, Denzel Washington coming up this year on Midwest Film Journal. So we're really excited about those. And we'll have some other surprises, I'm sure, sprinkled throughout the year. But you'll be part of that too, Matt, I'm sure, as you always are. We love hosting your work there as well. And
thank you.
We're just looking forward to another fun year.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to see what all you guys have going on this year. And once again, you can also follow Nick on Letterboxd at RageCage79, Cage with a K. Yeah, and that'll do it for this week's episode of The Obsessive Viewer. Next week, Tiny and I are going to be doing an extended Potpourri episode, so that should be a lot of fun. And then following that, we'll do an episode on Madam Web. So that'll be fun. Once again, check out patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, and check out the other podcasts, Tower Junkies and Anthology, for more of my voice in the internet. Once again, Nick, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next week. And now, enjoy this short clip from our Patreon exclusive feed. For this and more exclusive content, join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. And I don't know how to reckon that with my disappointment with how on the nose that flirtatious stuff was throughout the end of this episode and the beginning of this episode. Granted, it's also not a lot of time for them to really grow as characters or grow into this romantic coupling. So maybe that's part of it, that I feel like maybe it was too heavy-handed in the beginning of the episode and the end of last episode. And maybe the reason for that is because they're getting separated at the end of this episode. But when they are kind of just talking it out and they're talking about their attraction to one another, and they're kind of talking about how, you know, like Brother Constan's like, I thought you were going to, you know, bang me. Thank you for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This episode was produced and edited by me, Matt Hurt. If you have feedback, thoughts on our reviews, or just want to connect, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. For more information on all of our shows, including a full archive of our episodes and show notes, plus plenty of written reviews, visit obsessiveviewer.com. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a follow on social media and subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. Also, consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible to help increase our visibility and help grow our community. If you want to support the show and help keep us going while getting early access to new episodes as well as a steady stream of exclusive content, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Our theme song is A Little Mad Sometimes by As Good As It Gets. For more of their music, check them out on Spotify and at asgoodasitgetsmusic.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.